welcome everybody. Let's talk real estate. Your weekly BS with Barry Saywitz about the current commercial real estate market here in Southern California. As we take a no BS look at both sides of the issues driving this market today to find the best solutions going forward. With our man right in the middle, Barry Saywitz. Hey, Barry.
Hey, good morning, Paul, and good morning out there to all of our viewers and our listeners. It's Tuesday morning again. I'm Barry Saywitz, president of the Saywitz Company, managing partner of Saywitz Properties, and we are talking real estate. We're trying something new today. We have a partially remodeled radio studio. We have new microphones. We have new technology, and yet we do not have video. So we're going to go straight up with the audio. You can't see what I'm doing. I could be home in my underwear. I'm not. Oh, you can see me. Well, then I'm not home in my underwear. I won't try and BS anybody. It's still early in the morning. But I am excited about today's show today. We have with us a guest who's a friend of mine, someone I've known for a long time, watched him rise in his business and political career, Steve Sanchez, Mayor Pro Tem from the City of La Quinta out in the Coachella Valley. Steve, welcome to the show.
Hey, Barry. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I apologize for the technology faux pas, but we're going to do the best we can, and we're still going to talk about some exciting stuff. You are the first part in our multi-part series focusing on the Coachella Valley and the different aspects of not only the economy, the real estate market, and the different cities that we have out in the Coachella Valley. And I figured no one better than you. Not only do you have the political and economic side, but also the real estate background. And so for those out there who are not familiar with Steve is a longtime real estate broker and working throughout the entire Coachella Valley. We have done several transactions together. And so, Steve, I want to rewind. I know you way back when you were better looking and taller and thinner, just like myself. But I know when you first got started, you got started in the commercial real estate brokerage business out in the Coachella Valley. What made you get into the real estate business in the first place?
Yeah, it all started with a buddy of mine who he used to sell apartments, and you know him, Scott Wilson. And one day, this is a few years before I started, I looked up at an apartment and I said, how does this work? What's the business of this thing? Somebody owns it, somebody's making money. And so I reached out to Scott, met with him, and said, hey, I'm going to buy apartments. And, we talked for a while, and at that time, banks just stopped lending for new guys like me, right? So I was like, whatever. So I went back to do what I was doing. And then a couple of years later, Scott reached out to me and said, hey, Steve, I'll mentor you on how to sell apartments, right? I was just always fascinated by apartments. I went to seminars and read books and things like that. And so I got into commercial real estate mainly to sell apartment buildings.
And so this was back around what year?
Let's see. So I started in officially January of 2014 is when I started, when I got my license and everything like that. So a little bit before that, right around December or so, like 13. But and then 2 years prior to that or so, a year and a half, 2 years, is when I had that conversation with Scott. And I'm just fortunate he remembered, and I remember being scared. I was like, does this thing work? Am I going to make money here? Am I going to be able to live? And he was a good mentor. He was a good mentor. And I learned a lot from him.
Yeah, and that was an interesting time in the commercial real estate markets because really at that point, 2012, 13, 14 started to come out of the recession area, and a lot of people out in the desert had lost a lot of money in the real estate from a practical standpoint, and also just in terms of the values of their homes and their commercial properties, many of which to the tune of 50% or more. And so I remember when I started buying property out in the Coachella Valley, the sellers that I was talking to were telling me that they had bought property in the early 2000s, and it had taken, a good 10 or 12 years for the market just to get back to close to what they had paid for it. And that was one of the reasons they were trying to get out. And then all of a sudden, the market starts to take off all over in Southern California and out in the desert as well. And so the apartment market out there really has seen a lot of change over the last 10 years. I mean, talk about what you've seen in terms of not only rents, but just a desire and appetite for people to want to buy property in the Coachella Valley.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, Barry, I think you were my first client.
Yeah, no, I remember you had like torn shoes and, your car was all scratched, and then look at you now. I mean, it's a good success story. There are a number of guys that I have done business in the past with who are younger guys that were just starting out, and then I do a deal with them, and then the next deal they show up in a new car and a new suit, and then the next deal they got a wife and some kids and a new house, and that's how it goes. So it's a good success story. Nonetheless, and people ask me all the time. I'm doing an interview next week on somebody else's radio show, and they said, "What are 5 things that you need to be successful in commercial real estate?" That's what we're going to ask you when you come on the show. So one of the things is you need to have a good work ethic. You need to work hard and believe in what you do, and I think you have that, and I've seen it from you. So I guess my question is, in terms of the market itself, since the time you started until, let's call it today, I mean, you fast forward, I think the first deal we did, people were paying $400, $500, $600 a month in rents. And today, people paying $2,400, $2,500, $2,600 a month in rents. It's really been a significant change.
It's crazy. As far as rents, I think I'm not really familiar with the rest of California. I'm only assuming, just from my political hat, that there is a lack of inventory, right, throughout the state for dwelling units, and it's the same here in the Coachella Valley. And as you know, we really haven't built apartments. I think maybe this last year or so, apartments have finally been built. Maybe about 2 or 3 of them, market rent apartments that are actually being built, I should say, or permits are being pulled to be built. So for a long time, we just haven't built apartments out here in the Coachella Valley. And so, one thing that owners have going for them is, there's more renters than there are units for people to rent.
Yeah.
And, obviously when things go up with, goods and products of other industries, rents, all of that stuff goes up with it, right? Cost of living, everything like that. I mean, it's like you said, I remember, rents were like $400 or $500 in some of these areas, and now they're close to $2, almost $3 in some areas, and I never would have thought it, right?
And so what do you think, is there one thing that you attribute the rise in rents? I mean, certainly supply demand. I think that's an obvious one. The other thing I think that we've seen, I'm curious your thoughts, is that you have a lot of people that have migrated to the Coachella Valley from Los Angeles, from Orange County, from San Diego, from out of state. And if you come from Los Angeles and you wind up paying $2,000 for an apartment, it's cheap. It's like half price. And so people don't mind paying the rent out there, and they gobbled stuff up, no problem. Whereas the person who's already out there, who's been renting for $500, $600, $700 to pay $2,000, it's a shell shocker. And so I think that ran the prices up. And then the other factor that I think is a big one, again, I'm curious what you think, is that you have a lot of the seasonal rentals. So what happens is there's less inventory in the market, whether it's houses, whether it's condos, whether it's apartments, because there are snowbirds from Canada, from the Midwest, from the East Coast that come, and they'll do a 6-month lease and pay a significant premium. And then it takes that inventory off the market, making it that much tighter for the 12-month rental. I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, that's a good point. And a lot of my current buyers, have been folks from the larger cities, right? The Bay Area, LA, San Diego, OC, places like that, where $1 million out there doesn't get you much, but it goes a long way out here.
Yeah.
So, they started buying up all these properties out here. And quite frankly, a lot of those folks that own in LA, they were used to like 2 caps and things like that. So when they came out here, and things were still higher cap rates. Now they're lower again, but still higher than we usually get like in LA and places like that.
Yeah.
But as far as your comment about snowbirds and whatnot, that's a valid point, right? Let's say I need to rent, year round. It's hard for me to rent a condo for 6 months and then move again for 6 months until that snowbird comes back, right? Because they're willing to pay more. So, Yeah, and I think finally owners, they came from the big areas, fixed up some of these apartments and, started charging what they should, the max that they could get, I know a lot of folks that have done stuff like that. They just cleaned them up, made them a little nicer, and they just pushed the envelopes, see who's going to rent, right?
Right.
And obviously, like the housing market, location is key also, right? You can only charge so much in so many areas, but even some of these areas that were paying $300 a month before, they're over $1,000 now, right? The places that quote unquote rougher areas, right? Even those rents are a lot higher than what they used to be a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and I think that the fact that you've had owners come in and fix up properties that are older, make them nicer, and then want to charge obviously higher rents as a result of it, that then runs the market up as well. The idea that I could pay really cheap rent and I have an older, not fixed up place, there's just not that many of those around anymore. And so the folks that are out there, and I feel for them, but the ones that are on a fixed income, the ones that are retired, the ones that are used to paying what I'm going to call yesterday's rent, it really becomes much more difficult for them going forward.
Yeah, and it's harder for them right now to purchase a home. Interest rates are a little higher for what they can pay for. And quite frankly, what they can pay for, in a home really doesn't exist anymore in price, right? That's, to go with what you're saying, at yesterday's prices, right? For a home.
Well, look, if you were to rewind a couple of years ago, you could have bought a house for a couple $100,000 in most parts of the Coachella Valley. There were opportunities to do that, and you could have had an interest rate in the 2s or 3s. Today, the prices really haven't. The prices ran up, right? So now a $200,000 house is $300,000 or $400,000, and then the interest rates have gone up, and now you're at 7% and not 3%, and so your mortgage payment, just went up dramatically. But what I find interesting is we actually have more people within our portfolio out there that are actually still buying homes that are looking, because you've now started to see a little bit of a kink in the pricing, and with the rents the way that they are, the mortgage payment may be the same or even less at the end of the day after taxes as paying the rent, because the rents have gone so high. I mean, if you were paying $1,500 a month in rent, you couldn't duplicate that in a house payment. If you have to pay $3,000 a month in rent, you could own a house for the same amount of money, assuming you can qualify and you have the down payment.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Absolutely true. And I think a lot of folks are banking on hopefully interest rates coming down a little bit, so they'll just maybe be able to negotiate a little bit better on the
they can go back and refinance, which is an interesting pitch. Somebody pitched me on a deal last week and said, you should buy this apartment building, and I said, the price is ridiculous. It's just completely overpriced, and you're selling me a no return property with the premise that I can go back and fix the property up, raise the rents on the folks that are there, and if those folks can't pay it, then they'll move and someone else can pay it, and I do all this heavy lifting and dirty work, and then you're telling me I should buy it, and then maybe interest rates will come back down in a year and I can refinance, and then I'll get an even better deal. And I said that logic is just completely flawed. It might work if you're buying a house, but on a commercial property, you have a prepayment penalty, so you can't just go back and refinance it in a year. And then secondly, I'm not a big believer that interest rates are going to be dramatically cheaper, if at all, in a year. I think the lenders are being very difficult, at least the ones that I'm talking to, and it's really, they're being far more selective than they were before, which then puts pressure on the investment market as a whole. And so I'm curious your thoughts on this one, because I know when I first started buying out in the desert, and I think the first deal you and I did together, it was a 7 or 7.5 cap. And and then in Orange County and Los Angeles at the time, the cap rates were probably 4 to 5. So it was a 2-point spread between the coast, which made some sense, right? You're taking a riskier deal in a different market that's not as deep, not as close to the coast, and maybe had more exposure. Then when the cap rates at the coast went to, call it 3 to 4%, you had cap rates in the desert going down to 5 to 4, and then there's limited product, and so people said, hey, I'm just going to try and sell a 3 cap in the desert, see if somebody bites, and then they can raise the rents. But now interest rates are at least 7, if not 7.5% in the desert, and you still have properties that are on the market trying to be sold at a 3 and a 4 cap. Does it hunt, I guess, is my question.
Yeah. No, that's a valid point, and still you keep an eye on the market out here, and there's very limited inventory. that you'll find out there on LoopNet or anything like that for apartments for sale. But you're right. Cap rates have, I think owners is kind of what you're saying. They're trying to see if they can still get those 5 caps and 4 caps out here in the desert. Because I've been looking at the market and the properties that, the larger properties, large for us in the desert is like 20 units or so, right? Those are large properties for us. We don't have a lot of skyscrapers like you guys have in the big cities. But, a lot of these owners are holding tight at their 4 or 5 caps. And really, I think they're hoping for exchange buyers, somebody that has to buy, really likes the desert, and they're willing to pay a 5 cap, in order to avoid tax repercussions and whatnot. So that's kind of what I'm seeing. But the regular buyer, kind of like yourself, you're right. You're not buying a 5 cap out here.
No, it's very tough, and that's what I told the broker on this project last week. I said you should look for a 1031 buyer. You should look for a snowbird who spends part of the year out there, who likes and wants to buy a place and keep an eye on it, or you should look for a retired person who's moving to the desert or has a house there, and then they might do it. But if you sit down and look at it on a piece of paper, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And so that's why I think there's still more change in the air all over, really. I mean, whether it's at the coast or in Los Angeles or in the desert, the cap rates have continued to rise. There is still limited product, which is what I think is still propping up the prices. But when you start to dig in and you have an older property that needs work with low rents where there's heavy lifting, and then the lender says, hey, I'm going to be tight on what I'm going to lend, there's just a lot of forces working against you. You really want to buy that property, you're just going to have to struggle with a very low return and hope for the long term. It just doesn't make a lot of sense in today's market, and that'll be interesting to see, because as the 1031s slow down, which they already have, you have less and less buyers out there. I guess the other question is, what have you seen in terms of the activity? It seems like the folks that I talk to out there in the desert, not only on the residential side, but on the apartment and the commercial side as well, where if you rewind a year, 18 months ago, you had multiple offers on a property. You had a property selling in a week. All you had to do was hold your hand up and the stuff would go. And today, not so much, right? And so the real world is not that a property should sell in 4 days. It really should sell in 60 or 90 days. But people have a short memory, and they expect what yesterday's deal was. Have you seen that slow down where it's a longer transaction time and fewer people chomping at the bit?
That's exactly what I'm seeing. I couldn't have said it better myself. And just to go with your rent scenario, where rents have gone up, from like $500 to $2,000 or $3,000. One thing I have noticed, and I'm not sure if you've noticed it with your apartments, where let's just say somebody was paying $3,000 in rent. Once all that COVID relief money went away,
they can't afford it.
My clients started seeing their tenants struggle with that new rent payment.
Yes.
And while they've reduced their rent a little bit, it's still higher than what they did.
Yes.
What they paid a few years ago, right?
100%. So I couldn't agree more, right? So I'd pick a number on it, and this is not, nobody hold me to it, but if you were renting a 2-bedroom apartment, hypothetically 12 or 18 months ago, and you were getting $1,400, $1,500, $1,600 for that, and then all of a sudden the rents are $2,400, $2,500, $2,600, $1,000 a month more. Then what happens is the tenant who is used to paying that old number, whose budget is based on that number, cannot afford the new rent or anything close to it. So they can't move because that really is the market. And then they stay, but then the current landlord raises their rent. The current landlord is either not interested in fixing the place up because they're not getting full market, or they want to fix it up and get full market, in which case that tenant can't afford it, right? And so now what happens is those tenants are in there. It's summertime, it's hot in the desert, it's typically slower economy, there aren't as many people around, and people normally struggle anyway in July, August, first part of September, and so we're seeing that. And then the problem is, if you're a tenant and you're struggling, I'm not sure where you go, right? I'm not sure where the downgrade is. You would have to go from a city like La Quinta to either Indio or Coachella and move even further east and find a less desirable property that would be cheaper. Or you'd have to go to Desert Hot Springs, where that submarket is cheaper. But going from La Quinta to Bermuda Dunes to Palm Desert, not much change. I mean, it is what it is, right? And so it really makes it a challenge for not only a tenant who's out there looking for a place, but from a landlord's perspective, now we've seen the activity where stuff used to get rented in like 2 days because, again, limited inventory, a lot of people looking. You don't have as many people in the summertime. I think it'll come back in about 45 or 60 days, but for the moment, it's slower.
Yeah, absolutely. And you were correct about, having multiple offers. You put a property. In fact, most of my stuff, I would just call somebody up like you, Barry, and say, hey, I got this product coming up. And it would be sold, right? I mean, before you even hit the market type of a thing. Now, I've got to wait, 4 months or so, 3-4 months, to find a buyer, right?
Yeah, and now you got to pitch it. Now there's a story, I got to tell you. Before it was, I got this property, and then somebody says, all right, I'll take it. Now it's, well, let me tell you why you should buy it. Let me tell you all the good things about it, right? It's, I've got to do a sales pitch. You might even have to write something up about it, a little blurb. But that I think is the struggle. And then the question will be, if I want to buy investment property, commercial, medical, office, apartment in the desert, and I got to pay a 4 cap. Why wouldn't I just buy something at the coast if I could and get the same return and have less risk and get a property that might appreciate more? That's my struggle as somebody looking at multiple markets. And so again, I think some of those buyers that were happy to go to the inland markets, whether that's Riverside, San Bernardino counties, have shied and pulled back because they're like, okay, now there's some other opportunities at the coast.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting.
And I've also had other clients that I, always cold call, like, hey, you want to sell type of thing. Yeah, and people realize, okay, I can probably get a lot more from my apartment than what I pay, but where am I going to go, right?
Right. Right. What am I going to do with my money? Because if I buy a 1031 and I go buy a triple net Walgreens or a Starbucks or a Rite Aid or something like that, the cap rates on those are really low, and then somebody can't get what their return is, or they have to go buy a Walgreens in West Virginia or Mississippi, and they go, why would I want to do that? And so that I think also stymies the market, where the seller, I'm curious when you talk to them, says, I would sell if you got me my price, which is X, which is I want to sell high, and then I want to go buy something else and buy low. And those dynamics just don't hunt.
Exactly. Well, and you have a lot of people, like you were saying before, that have 2% interest rates, right? And they're like, well, it doesn't make sense for me to sell this thing, right? Unless I can get the same thing from somewhere else. So, anybody who has a loan that's assumable with a low interest rate, I think they're in a good position to sell whatever it is that they're trying to sell.
Yeah, or just keep it because they can't duplicate the rate they've got, right?
Yeah, or keep it, or sell the financing or something like that. But it's these interest rates are really hurting the market out here, as you're seeing in your area as well.
I think it slows it down. I think for the desert in particular, it'll be very interesting to see what happens here in the next 90 days, because as you get back into the winter season, where the snowbirds come back, the Canadians come back, the temperatures drop a little bit, and then people start showing back up. Number one, will the tenants that are out there, will their struggles be less because the economy's picking back up? I'd like to think so. And then secondly, will the activity in the market pick up, or will it just stay flat? And so, if it winds up staying flat through the third quarter and into the fourth quarter, I think it'd be interesting to see what happens with the property values.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in the meantime, I've had to learn about other commercial products a little bit more too, right, to help me out.
Right. So you guys do retail, you guys do office, you guys do a little bit of medical. I mean, you're dealing with all different asset classes.
Yeah. So in our firm, there's somebody who quote unquote specializes in something, right? And this being a small market, we tend to know everybody. So somebody will call me and say, "Hey, Steve, I got this, industrial building I want to sell." Well, me personally, I know enough about industrial, but I'm not an expert. So I'll team up with somebody in my office that is an expert on that. So smaller markets like this, everybody knows each other, so that helps out. But that's really helped keep me and other agents afloat out here. just because just apartments, what I did for the first 5-6 years of my career, I can't just do apartments right now because
there's not enough activity. I agree.
Right.
So let's shift gears for a second, because I know that you historically have been community minded and have gotten involved with the City of La Quinta where you live, and then got on the city council, and now we fast forward to today, and you are Mayor Pro Tem, getting ready to move into the mayor's position. How did you get involved in the political side of things, and why?
Yeah, I mean that question brings me back to my days in Jersey, where I grew up. I grew up in New Jersey. And I remember I was just talking to my sister about this. I was 16 when I first worked in my first campaign. I had no idea what I was doing. A buddy of mine was like, "Hey, we're going to help our mayor run for Congress, and they're going to give us pizza." I'm like, "All right, yeah." As a 17-year-old, that's all you need to tell me, right? Pizza.
Right.
And that's how I got started. Then I enlisted in the Marine Corps and ended up in California. But just even in high school, my favorite subjects were really history and government and things like that. But after my time in the Marine Corps, after 8 years, I was never really politically active or anything like that while I was in the Marine Corps. I was just focused on being a Marine, right? I didn't really have time to think about politics or government or anything like that. But it wasn't until I got out and decided to make the Coachella Valley home. And for your listeners and viewers, the Palm Springs area, the greater Coachella Valley area, those are the cities that we were kind of talking about as we were talking about the apartments. It's 9 cities that make up the greater Palm Springs area, the Coachella Valley. And so I just really got involved out here in the community. I wanted to give back, right? Just coming back from a war and see how other countries are. I wanted to see how I can get involved. And it started off with just becoming a big brother, right, with the big brothers and big sisters. I didn't really know anybody out here. And so I figured, let me see how I can give my time to somebody else. And then from that, you know how it is, Barry. You volunteer for one thing, and then other organizations like, hey, come volunteer with us.
Right, you get on the list, and then everybody calls.
Yeah.
Right?
And next thing you know, you're working with 3, 4, 5 different charities, which is volunteer however you can. And through that, you start meeting all the elected officials in the area. And then my path just kind of, took its course from that. I just started hanging out with all the local politicians and their staff and everybody like that. And I ended up working for a state legislator out here at one time, and then she termed out. But from that, I just really ingrained myself in the community out here. And then there was an opening on the city council, and my goal was to run for city council one day. But because one of the council members decided to retire, that was my opportunity to run. Otherwise, there was no need for me to run for city council. The city is doing well. Financially, it's doing well. It's a growing city. There's no reason to unseat a sitting council member,
Right, nobody's not happy with
he retired. It opened up the opportunity, and here I am.
So you went knocking door to door. You put up some posters. You were standing on the street corner waving a sign a couple of times. I saw you. And then lo and behold, you're on the city council. And so for those out there that don't know, some cities, to become the mayor, you have to be elected by the general public in an election.
Yeah.
In other cities, you elect the city council members, and then the city council members will either rotate or elect among themselves who is the mayor pro tem and the mayor. And so for La Quinta, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys do the latter, which is where you will nominate from within in terms of who the next mayor is going to be. Is that how it goes, or is it actually an election?
Yeah, so actually in La Quinta, we elect our mayor separately.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, and then the mayor pro tem position, we rotate. Kind of a handshake agreement, right? It just goes in order. But in theory, it could just, some cities, don't do it in order. They just vote for whoever they want to, right?
Yeah.
So, I do have to say with our council, we have a good working relationship with each other. We really try to work together, and even if there's a disagreement on whatever issue it is, there's no spite, right? No one's out to get each other. We actually try to figure it out and kind of come to a good consensus. that works out for everybody. So I'm actually really fortunate to be on La Quinta City Council.
And it's a grooming position, I assume, for people to be able to learn about the city's operations and grow, so that if there is an opportunity to become mayor at a future point in time, then you've got that history and you've got that background, you're ready to step in.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the one thing I learned is there's math and there's government math, and government math is interesting.
Yeah, it's got an eraser, I think. And so, but La Quinta, for those who don't know, and I'm pretty familiar with the city and own property out there, but I mean, number one, it's just a great place. There are 26 different golf courses within the city. The average median income in the city is much higher than most of the other cities out in the Coachella Valley, and maybe that's due to the retirement community out there. But also, it really has grown with some of the other events out in the Coachella Valley that have continued to flourish over the past number of years, like the music festival, like Stagecoach, like the golf tournaments, both the men and the women. And really, I think the city has benefited from a lot of that. What would you say are some of the big projects that I know you guys have a couple of big projects going on. I want you to talk about them, with the apartments and then also the street beautification that you just finished up recently.
Yeah, no, good point. And so for your listeners and viewers out there, the Coachella Valley, even though it's 9 cities, a lot of the things we do together, right? Our tourism, we have a tourism bureau that covers all 9 cities, and we benefit from each other, right? Hospitality is one of our biggest employers out here, if not the largest employers between the hospitals and hospitality and the casinos out here. Those are our largest employers. And things like you mentioned, Stagecoach, Coachella Fest. In our own city, we have a major golf tournament. The city next door that borders ours, they have a major tennis tournament. And so all of that just fuels our economy out here. And what La Quinta, we focus on just reinvesting back into the infrastructure, right? Keeping La Quinta beautiful. We have great trails, like you were saying. And this sounds like an ad for my city, but we take pride in the way our city looks. We're redoing our streets, like you're saying, and
well, I like the
big city,
the civic center area really in La Quinta. I like You've got the library, you've got the park, you've got the fountains, you've got City Hall, you've got the rec center. I mean, it's really all kind of in one place. Similar to Palm Desert. I mean, I think that's just a great opportunity for people to have a central place to go and take advantage of a bunch of amenities.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we have one of the safest cities in the state. So, all of that just combined. If you can't keep the city safe, tourists don't want to come and visit. People don't want to move here. Businesses don't want to open up. But if you have a good, safe city, a clean city, everything thrives, right? Businesses, tourists, residents, everybody just thrives together. And that's the good thing about our city. We have an apartment being built right now. We're really big on aesthetics and quality of how our apartments look. I remember when I first moved to La Quinta, I need a place to rent real quick, and I walked into this place, and they're like, "Oh, it's a low-income housing." I would have thought this was a top-notch apartment complex, but we keep that level even with our low-income housing that we have here in the city.
So let's talk about that for a second, because there is a new big project that's going up near Old Town, right? And then there's been a bunch of, I want to call necessarily redevelopment, but rebeautification, I guess, of the Old Town area by the city and the streets and the landscaping. What's the overall plan for that particular apartment complex? Is it low-income housing? What will it look like? And then are there other plans to continue to make the Old Town area a nicer, better destination place?
Yeah, so the area that we call Old Town, and a lot of cities have kind of a version of their own, or a downtown area, right? So that Old Town area is actually privately owned, and the city doesn't own any of it. We own the streets and whatnot around it. But we have a good partnership, with that Old Town area. And so, we're working on the streets, the landscaping, beautification, kind of everything that we can do from our side to make it, more appealing, right, for the businesses in that area, so they can continue to thrive. We do have some apartments being built in that area. Those are market rate apartments that are being built. Really nice designs, so that'll be good for that area because it's very walkable for those residents. They can live, work in that same area.
Sure.
We have a few down the street. We have a large Montage and Pendry being built at will be our golf course that we're selling off, right, to the developer once they have it all built out. And that'll be great for tourism for the area.
And then also you have the Disney complex, which is a massive long-term development, which while it's not in the city of La Quinta, I just think helps the overall valley as a whole in terms of driving tourism and bringing people to the area.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I was saying earlier, what one city does, we kind of all benefit from it.
No question. And I think you've already seen that, right? I mean, you've seen all cities, the property values have gone up. All cities have made strides to beautify their streets and their landscaping and keep it clean and safe. And, it's just a much more desirable place for people to live. Whereas before people would just go there for the weekend and leave. I don't think that's the case anymore at all. And now with people working from home, really you can work from, right? So you go sit out on the patio, look at the golf course, or go work for a little bit and go to the golf course. It's not a bad gig. I'm jealous.
Yeah, well, and that kind of all adds to our conversation about apartments also, right? People live there, right? So they choose to live there, whether it's because, the scenery or financial reasons, right, or both. And that adds to driving up rents and property values too, right, for apartment owners. When you compare, let's say La Quinta with another city, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, you can command better rents in La Quinta than you could in some other cities. And it all comes down to, what kind of decisions your local government's making on the infrastructure and quality of life in that city. So that all adds up too. And so,
Yeah.
As an apartment buyer like yourself, maybe you want to go into an area that's, not as nice and then hopefully it gets better, right?
Right, but to me, I mean, we own properties in other cities, and I won't name them, where the city's not behind beautification. They're not really doing anything dramatic to deal with public safety, and so the city's not, in my opinion, going in the right direction. I don't want to buy any more property there. I want to buy property in a city that's going to get better and continue to grow over time. Not only will it be easier to maintain, and you can keep a better class of tenant, but also you'll get a return on your investment. I mean, that's, if you're a long-term holder, that makes perfect sense. And so I like the city of La Quinta a lot. I like where it's going and where it's been and where it's headed. And so, for all the folks out there and as a property owner, thank you and the rest of the people on the city council for all you do to make the city a better place to work and live and play. I told you when we started it would go quick. We have exhausted our time for today.
Wow.
You and I can chat all day. But I guess a couple things. Number one, where can our viewers find you, not only in your day job on the real estate side of things, but also what website can they go to for the city if they want to check out or learn more about the city?
Yeah, so the city's website is laquintaca.gov. And I think there's like a new law now that mandates all cities to have a .gov domain name. So we're laquintaca.gov.
Got it. And for the brokerage website, if I want to...
Yeah, for the brokerage website, it's Wilson Meade, MEADE.com. Wilson-Meade.com.
Got it. Or you can Google Steve Sanchez and you can find him. And so...
Yeah, you can Google me, or if you're up at 3 in the morning, you can go for a run with me and we can chat apartments.
That's good. And I look for more great things on the brokerage side from you and on the political side. So I appreciate you being on the show and sharing your thoughts with us. And for you and your family, wish you continued success.
Barry, I want to thank you for having me on your show, and to your listeners and viewers for allowing me to give my insight about the Coachella Valley market as far as apartments and just everyday life out here.
Great. I appreciate it. To our viewers and our listeners, I am Barry Saywitz. If it's Tuesday, we're talking real estate. We will see you back next time on Let's Talk Real Estate. Thanks again to all the folks who put the show on here. We will get our technology issues sorted out shortly. I'm certain of that, probably 5 minutes after we finish. But we'll see you back next time on Let's Talk Real Estate. Thanks for tuning in.
Well, there you have it. You've been listening to Let's Talk Real Estate, your weekly BS with Barry Saywitz about the current state of the real commercial real estate market right here in Southern California. On Orange County's only community radio station, OC Talk Radio, streaming live from our studio here at the University of California Irvine's Beale Applied Innovation Center.